Hello, everyone. It's Mr. Dimmick, and I'm going to be taking over some of the lectures for the next couple weeks here for Mr. Sibley. And where we're going to start with me is the Cold War, and this is going to be the time just after the Second World War ends. We're going to pick up sort of right where we left off after the last lecture, and we're going to start talking about the developments in the late 1940s and 1950s. So, Cold War. You've probably heard the term before. It's basically the time of tension between the Soviet Union and the United States, and really, for all intents and purposes, we had never been friends even from the get-go. It was all of World War II when we were allied with them was more of a case of the enemy of my enemy is my friend. So in this case, neither one of us were fans of Nazi Germany, and so we ended up fighting together to defeat them, but we were not friends going in, and we certainly weren't friends coming out once we had defeated our common enemy. And so in 1945, again, right at the end of the Cold War, or excuse me, of World War II, at the beginning of the Cold War, we see the formation of the United Nations, the UN in New York. Big happy family where we could all work out our differences internationally before we descend into war again, or at least that was the idea. Yes, an international peacekeeping organization that would prevent conflict. It has had mixed success, as I'm sure you are aware, but that was the goal, is that after the most destructive war in human history, we would have some way to prevent that from happening again. Harry Truman is, of course, the President of the United States because President Roosevelt died just about 3 months into his fourth term in office. And so Mr. Truman was the person who succeeded him, and so he is the one who's in charge in the United States. And after World War II, as again we're seeing the formation of the United Nations, there were a lot of goals that were different from country to country. Obviously, we're going to have different aims depending on who you are. And for us, America, land of the free, home of the brave, we want that for everybody else too. We have a democratic society, and that's what we fought to try and bring to the rest of Europe. And so that's the sort of thing that we want to see happening in all of the countries that we liberated. Now, on the other side of that equation is the Soviet Union, and their situation is a little bit different. We had, excuse me, the oceans protecting us from land invasion during World War II, but the Soviets were absolutely devastated. I mean, they lost more people in that war than most of the rest of the world put together. And so one of their goals was to gain protection for themselves to avoid that happening again in the future. So if you look at the map over here on the right side of the screen, you can see that they began sort of swallowing up all of those Eastern European countries to protect themselves from invaders. So you can see there East Germany, Poland, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria. All of those countries were things that were called satellite countries in that they were nominally independent. On paper, they were their own countries, but really behind the scenes, it was the Soviet Union that was sort of holding those puppet strings and deciding what went on and making sure that they were spreading communism and the communist ideals in all of those places. So to look at those a little more in depth, these are the countries that the Soviets had liberated from the Nazis as they swept in from the east. We obviously came in from the west after D-Day, but as the Red Army had come in from the east, they swallowed up Poland, Albania, Bulgaria, Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Romania. And Germany was sort of a special case in that it was split into the four zones of occupation after World War II ended. And that just meant that each of the four major allies took one section of the country that they would administer until they were ready to give control back to the Germans. And so that would have been West Germany then and East Germany once they were ready to hand control back because the Soviets and the rest of the Western Allies weren't able to cooperate, and they didn't decide to on what sort of model they would rebuild a new Germany, and so they ended up just splitting it. And so the U.S., French, and British sections became West Germany, and the Soviet section became East Germany. And that is going to end the first part of this lecture, and we will continue on in just a moment.